Day 7 begins under a white line painted on packed arena clay, patient as a metronome. A black Neapolitan Mastiff stands squared, dewlap silvered with drool, eyes ringed by old vigilance. 2 meters back, a mahogany clipboard sleeps beneath glass, securing a notarized pledge and escrowed deed. Clip the brass snap, walk 20 measured meters at heel, keep his paws behind paint, claim the estate. Cameras purr from the pavilion shade, black lenses blinking like insects, hunting movement in warm air. Sofia Martinez lowers her breathing until her ribs move like tides, attention narrowed to exhale timing. She carries a leather lead rubbed with chamomile, smelling of sleep, quiet as folded church linen. The Mastiff measures her silhouette, not her stare, and the crowd's noise becomes distance, irrelevant, small. Somewhere behind heavy canvas, a billionaire studies patience the way gamblers study cards, convinced probability obeys pride. Rules are traps disguised as promises, especially the printed clause stapled beneath the pledge's ribbon. The animal must not cross the white line first. Heel means parallel motion, not a dragging victory. Paws behind paint, jest forward, handler steady as a plumb line. Everything counted in slow frames. Arena workers dust fresh chalk, lines bright as winter bones, ensuring replay won't argue with daylight. A steward clears the path, checking boot treads, metal bowls, flash angles, every common trigger cataloged carefully. Some in the stands expect spectacle, not measurement. Truth prefers rulers, not cheers, and no shortcuts. Sofia walks the lane empty-handed first, counting strides, memorizing distances, teaching nerves where to settle. The Mastiff watches without blinking, measuring her breathing with his own, matching cadence like borrowed courage. The claws waits, indifferent, ready to bless precision or record failure with equal, immaculate handwriting.
Yesterday's champagne still ghosts the pavilion rails, a sweetness clinging to shade where confidence tasted effortless. Cameras gathered, donors gathered, betting lines disguised as philanthropy gathered, and a signature landed like thunder. Sir Alistair Whitcomb admired the theater of certainty, the glittering arithmetic of odds pressed into glass. A legal officer sealed the pledge, escrowed deed sleeping beneath velvet, cameras drinking every careful flourish. He believed fear guaranteed outcomes, animals tremble, crowds echo, reputation outruns facts when money announces inevitability. Sofia watched quietly, studying not the man, but the paperwork, because fine print governs cruelty's disguises. She learned long ago that bravado loves microphones, while truth prefers a ledger, time-stamped and patient. Somewhere beyond the manicured hedges, a black dog breathed against chain link, guarding nothing except remembered hours. Before night, the wager was trending, a spectacle primed for victory, or an education filmed publicly. First contact never asks for trust, it asks for thresholds, a map of distances the body respects. Sofia turns her shoulder, softens height, stows her eyes, and lets her breath sink below thinking. The leather lead hangs loose, chamomile warming under sun, a small fragrance crawling toward old corridors. Metal bowls rattle somewhere, and the dog flinches, a flash of memory stitched under the skin. She waits for tied-out breathing, the moment the ribs soften, and places patience where panic usually blooms. Training here is subtraction. Remove glare, remove reach, remove hurry, until movement asks for permission. The Mastiff tests contrasts, measuring silhouette angles, counting footsteps, reading palms like a language without vowels. When he exhales, it lands heavy, and the arena's noise lifts off him like dust rising. Sophia steps into the space his fear vacates, carrying nothing except time and a promise of quiet.
Glass breaks louder in silence, a brittle punctuation where certainty imagined itself immune to interruption. The brass snap kisses steel with a small click, delicate as a wristwatch closing around trust. Nostrils dilate, jowls sag into acceptance, and the wide, armored skull dips as if remembering sanctuary. Some in the stands are disappointed because monsters should perform, not relax. Terror sells faster than tenderness. The billionaire's expression resets like glass, cooling, smoothing edges, calculating reputational contingencies behind immaculate manners. Sophia watches paw placement, a choreography rehearsed against chalk, keeping pads floating behind paint without hesitation. Every exhale earns a touch, every touch confirms a map. Body distances become braided threads holding steadiness. The arena smells of wet stone, camera oil, citrus cologne, and the sweet animal breath of survival. Under everything, the white line waits like winter shoreline, objective and cold, prepared to forgive nothing. On day one, the gate groaned like a slow hinge, and the kennels breathed a collective warning. Sophia signed a temporary tag, watched by a man whose posture suggested schedules, not second chances. Hal Markham introduced rules with a stare, then left her with hoses, bedding, and the heavy quiet. She met the dog behind chain link, saw the careful stillness, and recognized a scholar of harm. At home, Abuela unfolded a notebook browned by time, ink mapping counter-conditioning like a family inheritance. Chamomile, leather, breath pacing, shoulder turns, soft frames, rhythm rewards, small rituals against old explosions. Sophia slept beside photocopies, the pages smelling faintly of cinnamon and barns, a childhood preserved carefully. By morning, the plan fit inside muscle memory, ready for patience, ready for the inconvenient weather. The Mastiff waited, already reading her posture, already teaching her that thresholds are negotiations, not commands.
He wore his history on the neck, a smooth ring where hair remembered heat, pressure, and surrender. A cracked premolar winked when he panted, an architectural note left by someone who preferred shortcuts. Metal bowls made him shrink like tide pulled suddenly back. Boots made his pupils thin to wires. Laser pointers traced red ghosts across walls, and he froze as if stitched to shadows. Sophia recorded triggers on a folded card, then designed rehearsals that stayed under threshold without apologizing. Every victory demanded distance more than courage, geometry more than bravery, breathing more than bold announcements. The dog answered cadence, not pep talks, and softened whenever the world stopped asking for proof. By dusk, the chain-link enclosure felt quieter because someone finally spoke in distances and time. Tomorrow would ask for the same language again, until vocabulary replaced fear and grammar rebuilt trust. They built a quiet pact measured by breath, not ink, and practiced the art of being boring. Boring keeps hearts inside ribs, keeps paws behind paint, keeps headlines from writing disasters before noon. Sophia found cadence walking past open gates, letting choices exist, then rewarding rejections of escape with space. The Mastiff learned that leaving carried no glory, and staying was the first architecture of safety. She kept the lead slack like a telephone line humming, ready to carry reassurance without static. On exhale, she touched shoulder muscle lightly, a code clarifying pathways, a grammar inventing peaceful punctuation. Crowds saw nothing because small wins refuse theater, yet cameras captured stillness like a developing photograph. By morning, his trot matched her hips, a quiet metronome edging toward the future painted white. The pact intended no miracles, only habits. Miracles sometimes arrive late, disguised as ordinary repetition.
The first crack arrived from the tunnel, a sound engineered for panic, thin and surgically placed. It did not belong to the arena or the crowd or the moment earned by patience. The boom mic swallowed everything, carrying the pop like a splinter toward every listening room. Hal Markham turned too slowly, the speed of somebody rehearsed at not noticing what bruises confess. The Mastiff did not explode. He drifted forward, placing his body between noise and the girl. Crowd laughter shortened, then forgot itself, because predatory power seldom anticipates protection traveling the opposite direction. Somewhere above, champagne polished worry into poise, while security polished indifference into procedure, both equally practiced. Sophia let the moment pass without reward, because heroics can intoxicate thresholds faster than fear. Breath returned, like tide remarrying shore, and the line ahead waited, unpersuaded by sabotage and spectacle. A narrative rearranged itself in public because the dog guarded the same man who orchestrated certainty. People arrived thirsty for a monster's collapse. Instead, dignity briefly crossed species like weather changing direction. Sir Alastair blinked once, then learned that safety can embarrass power when it refuses predictable choreography. Sophia adjusted nothing, because nothing improved a moment honest enough to teach without announcement. The Mastiff loosened through the shoulders and planted his pads deliberately, anchoring trust with visible mechanics. A cameraman stopped breathing through the viewfinder, knowing some frames are heavier than captions will allow. Noise receded toward the hedges, replaced by counting, footfall by footfall, like hands learning careful handwriting. Some moments fix reputations permanently, not by scandal, but by steady evidence assembling itself under daylight. The test still waited. Miracles count nothing without measurements, and chalk forgets nobody who rushed consequences.
Dr. Eve Carter arrived with a scanner case, posture neutral, language deliberate, eyes tuned for thresholds, not drama. Veterinary medicine can adjudicate narratives when politics hesitate. Microchips remember what witnesses bury under embarrassment. She tested the reader against her palm, a green wink confirming batteries, and knelt beside the jowls. Sophia steadied breath during the sweep, one hand near shoulder, avoiding eyes, placing courage where the collar rests. The reader chirped decisively, displaying estate registration, kennel entry dates, vaccination codes, tidy and recent. Then it chirped again, fainter, deeper, the sound a diver hears while turning toward something older. Silence accumulated along the railing because second pings suggest buried stories, not clerical redundancies. Hal pretended boredom and failed. People pretending boredom usually grip railings like cliffs disguised as furniture. The reader waited for truth to be welcomed or resisted, and the dog simply breathed alongside inevitability. Numbers stepped onto the screen like modest actors, announcing an identity that matched the estate's paperwork. Nero belonged on the ledger, dates aligned cleanly, every column behaved with a certain polished assurance. Then the second identity rose from deeper tissue, older registration, another name traveling forward through silence. Midnight returned to daylight like a witness escorted into court, smelling faintly of corridors and winter. The first chip recorded convenience, the second chip recorded origin. Provenance frequently offends reputations invested in forgetting. Sophia absorbed the names without celebration, because names are keys, and keys should unlock rooms deliberately. A breeze carried citrus cologne across the arena, and the dog's pupils narrowed into thin declarations. Triggers behave like signatures. Certain scents write their names across muscle before memory translates them.
The crowd did not understand details, but it understood tension, and tension had just changed authors.
Midnight did not argue with Nero. Both names lived inside the same ribs, separated by paperwork and usefulness. Before the estate, the dog moved like a slow tide beside shelter volunteers, heavy yet considerate. After transfer, behavior sharpened into corners, not because monsters hatch suddenly, but because pressure shapes geometry. A scar as a topographical map, and his neck mapped evenings where restraint replaced guidance repeatedly. Sophia ran fingers along hair swirl patterns, reading cowlicks like wind histories, finding calm beneath agitation. A name can be medicine when spoken gently. A name can also be camouflage when profit requires forgetting. Midnight returned focus to the breath that had steadied him, trusting exhale more than any certificate. Somewhere, a ledger shivered, sensing its narrative losing traction, because origin stories prefer quiet witnesses. The arena prepared for evidence, and evidence prefers daylight that refuses spectacle yet records everything anyway. An archived auction catalog surfaced from a volunteer's phone, pixelated footage breathing like a half-remembered afternoon. Page B17 displayed a mastiff walking calmly beside a teenager, accepting touch without flinch or theater. Handlers discussed bone structure and soundness, the ordinary liturgy of sale days, nothing hinting at catastrophe. Transfer papers followed. Then came a new address, new routines, new incentives teaching fear through inconvenience. Sophia paused the video where the dog blinked slowly, the universal semaphore for safety finally understood. She understood the timeline. Change arrived after the estate, not before. Patterns testified louder than rumor. This mattered because justice resents spectacle. It wants dates, documents, recordings, and faces admitting chronology's coherence. The crowd registered the slow burn of proof, a different kind of thrill that rearranges loyalties. Somewhere, the future began measuring out 20 meters again, patiently inviting gravity to favor restraint. Rumor claimed an attack. Footage claimed a circle of bodies. Evidence claimed a shield raised instinctively. Bite angles radiated outward, defensive crescents, protecting a smaller animal hidden behind the broad, dark chest. He had not lunged for dominance. He had stationed himself like furniture between harm and panic. Men in tall boots misread stillness as plotting, because anxious patience resembles strategy when guilt observes it. Sophia narrated the geometry in her head, preparing language that would translate for cameras without scolding. Dr. Carter collected statements, counting timestamps, aligning reports with sun angles and clock tower bells. Meanwhile, the dog rehearsed exhale timing, rediscovering the cadence that makes thresholds expand instead of harden. Crowds prefer villains, but sometimes monsters retire early when given structure, air, and ordinary work. 20 meters waited like an exam with only one answer, written in chalk instead of ink. Hal Markham had grown professional at silence, the kind that keeps payroll steady and conscience parked carefully. But silence fractures when evidence migrates to phones and a green bubble thread vaults across screens. The messages read like choreography instructions for failure, delivering precise cracks and convenient distractions at intervals. Numbers attached to those orders matched family contacts, a pattern that embarrasses lineages more than headlines. Sophia copied the thread to a safe drive, not to humiliate, but to anchor testimony later. Dr. Carter forwarded time codes to security, requesting preservation of footage that usually disappears during renovations. Somewhere, a lawyer began breathing shallowly, counting liabilities like beads and wishing dogs never learned to heal. The arena, however, continued preparing an ordinary walk because truth favors boring procedures over dramatic gestures. 20 meters sat there, uncomplicated, promising to judge without bias, recording nothing except exactly what happened.
The collar arrived smelling of new leather, edges too clean, hardware heavy, balance wrong by small degrees. Sophia rolled it in her hands and felt a weight shift that belonged to batteries, not clasps. Hidden receivers masquerade as craftsmanship, dressing control as safety, turning thresholds into tests nobody can pass. She swapped to a wide martingale, soft and breathable, a loop that disciplines pressure rather than pain. Hal watched without comment, learning that some integrity is contagious and some equipment whispers its own guilt. The dog licked lips twice, shook skin like a curtain, then stood easier, breathing longer. Cameras recorded nothing special except comfort returning, which is always special when the world expects drama. Sir Alistair checked a watch and found that minutes can become heavy when plans begin losing momentum. The white line glittered faintly under new chalk, impartial, a finish line that only honors proportionate courage. White line math began with paw prints, small circles of chalk teaching patience, louder than any speech. Sophia marked a station just before paint, a landing pad where stillness replaces ambition without apology. Heels aligned like typed letters, shoulders parallel, head neutral, tail sweeping low, metronome set to breath. Metal bowls crashed deliberately behind a barrier, and the Mastiff turned an ear, then returned to center. Men in tall boots walked past like weather systems. She rewarded indifference, not endurance, measuring tiny releases. Distance stretched, then relaxed, like tide studying beaches. Repetition sculpted reflex until confidence recognized its reflection. Somewhere, lawyers rehearsed objections while chalk rehearsed truth. Only one rehearsal would matter by sundown. Sophia walked the route backward, forward, blindfolded by trust, hearing each meter like steps across porcelain. The Mastiff matched cadence, soft thunder housed in skin, ready to meet paint with measured restraint.
The lullaby arrived like a key changing a room's temperature, a melody inherited rather than invented. An old shelter VHS flickered on a borrowed monitor, showing the same tune and the same posture. A younger dog leaned into hands off camera, trusting sound before trusting touch, memorizing safety by rhythm. Abuela's voice navigated from another decade, naming each step without words, close enough to become muscle. Sophia understood that memory travels by scent and sound when paperwork cannot be trusted near microphones. The Mastiff exhaled during the chorus, a long, tireless breath that settled his ribs into predictable weather. Cameras watched a simple song translate trauma into vocabulary. Simplicity often humiliates theatrics without raising its voice. Sir Alistair's brow smoothed deliberately, grooming anxiety into composure, yet calculation clicked like clockwork underneath. Some truths arrive humming. The loud ones usually come later, accompanied by paperwork and changed names. Lady Whitcomb cultivated silence as a social grace, but conscience sometimes borrows louder instruments when cornered. A brooch pinned near her collar contained a memory card absorbing meetings where civility rehearsed sabotage. She listened to men describe cruelty as efficiency, and she learned that diction can launder intention. When the arena requested witnesses, she produced recordings without ceremony, allowing facts to carry themselves outward. The pavilion changed temperature again, cooling 2 degrees, because public truth alters climate like approaching weather. Sir Alistair adjusted a cuff, a movement perfected across decades, suddenly insufficient against a camera's patience. Sophia allowed the arena to work. Gravity handles reputations more efficiently than speeches ever manage. Hal Markham stared at his boots and discovered complicity reflected there, waiting like maintenance dust. The dog yawned, unamused by politics, interested only in breath counting and the generosity of distance.
Daniel Whitcomb owned a particular citrus cologne and a history of impatience documented poorly across private messages. Locker searches revealed atomizers, fabric fibers, and color residue matching compounds designed to sharpen electricity's persuasion.
Security combined timestamps with texts, and the choreography of failure assembled itself without room for interpretation. Family secrets resist daylight, but NDAs dislike cruelty, and whistleblower carve-outs enjoy quoting themselves loudly. Sophia did not raise her voice. She raised documents and let gravity do its ancient work. Sir Alistair watched calculation dissolve, understanding the cost of sponsorships tethered to reputations appearing carnivorous. The Mastiff, uninvited to politics, merely leaned into the nearest kindness, making goodness look embarrassingly efficient. Crowds decided in real time, redistributing loyalty toward quiet competence, away from suits that polished explanations. 20 meters became a verdict rather than a trick, and the white line asked for nothing theatrical. Donor badges rotated discreetly toward exits, a choreography of distance performed whenever storms find familiar names. Journalists adjusted leads to replace triumph with reckoning, because audiences prefer accountability scheduled before dessert. Security stopped pretending confusion, aligning posture with duty, and discovered courage remarkably similar to policy. Hal Markham signed a preliminary statement, handwriting heavy, confessing fatigue with curated accidents and curated silence. Lady Whitcomb stood near a sunbeam, face steady, learning that repair begins where performance finally surrenders. Dr. Carter reviewed logistics for the public test again, translating chaos into checklist items sharp as pins. Sophia walked the arena perimeter, touching posts, counting boards, anchoring her nerves to architecture rather than outcomes. The Mastiff paced once, then settled, recognizing rehearsals like familiar roads, trusting the route more than destination. Tomorrow had arrived while nobody noticed, and 20 meters looked exactly like yesterday, which is the point.
The gauntlet arranged itself with theatrical innocence, offering tall boots, metal bowls, cameras, and cautious weather. Sophia squared her shoulders to the distant line, then relaxed them, modeling breath discipline for borrowed lungs. The dog matched her metronome, finding cadence where panic used to bloom, stepping into rhythm like forgiveness. Men moved their weight unconsciously, and cameras reset, welcoming the clean arithmetic of daylight for judgment. Triggers fired as planned, bowl clatter first, then flash burst, then boot scuff. Each met with measured neutrality. Sophia rewarded the absence of theater, a pat on shoulder blade timed to the longest exhale. They reached the station before paint and paused, practicing stillness like it was a credential worth framing. A cloud slid across the sun, blessing contrast, sharpening outlines, clarifying pause from chalk without mercy. The white line listened without pity, ready to record either care or hurry and punish both equally. Heel began with intention, a shoulder-to-knee alignment that turned movement into sentence structure, clear and grammatical. Each step traced a letter. Together they wrote civility across sand rutted by weeks of rumor. Sit arrived softer than applause. Stay arrived braver than boasting. Recall arrived like loyalty choosing a home. Cameras captured the exhale that mattered most, the one that emptied history long enough to measure fairness. Boots lined the lane like monuments to earlier mistakes. The Mastiff passed them politely, unpersuaded by memory. Flashbulbs imitated lightning and failed. Thunder stayed inside ribs, softened, domesticated by repetition and patience. They crossed the 20 meters like handwriting finishing a line, punctuation approaching precisely where sense demanded. Paws hovered behind paint, then settled perfection, and chalk dust lifted lazily, announcing nothing except accuracy. Silence weighed more than the cheers would have weighed, because mastery prefers witnesses over noise.
Objections traveled faster than air, alleging a foul the chalk never learned to spell convincingly. Replays slowed everything to mercy, pads floating behind paint like careful ships refusing premature harbors. Angles blessed discipline, distance absolved intention, the claws saluted with bureaucratic indifference and perfect, necessary cruelty. A steward read aloud for cameras while the crowd discovered that fairness can be cinematic without confetti. Sir Alistair held posture like porcelain, yet porcelain cracks entertainingly under the patient tap of truth. Sponsors already texted assistance, adjusting distance. The pavilion's temperature altered as money inhaled risk. Sophia kept attention on the dog because victory needs guardianship more than celebration during fragile minutes. Hal initialed a second statement, smaller script, steadier hand, shoulders lowering like a confession's last syllable. The white line, satisfied, returned to being ordinary paint, which is what justice prefers after work. Victory delivered paperwork, and paperwork delivered questions, because headlines misprice assets and conceal inconvenient encumbrances. Sophia opened the folder and found liens nested like wintering birds, quiet, numerous, and territorial. The real value lived inside licenses, permits, donor lists, infrastructure, and a kennel that could become sanctuary. She remembered the dog's ribs softening under breath coaching and realized empires feel different when animals exhale safely. Sir Alistair's estate offered theater. The endowment could offer permanence, salaries, medicine, and time. Operational control mattered more than chandeliers. Outcomes mattered more than frontage. Design mattered more than grandeur. She measured courage against accounting, discovered compatibility, and found that stewardship tastes quieter than victory. The crowd kept waiting for celebration. She kept waiting for the dog's breath to answer decisions. When exhale arrived like tide, she knew which signature mattered, and it was not furniture.
Refusal can be a crown when worn correctly, and she lifted it without ceremony or apology. She accepted operational control, a funded mandate to build a trauma canine recovery center across the kennels. She returned the manor house itself, a theatrical shell better suited to parties than healing. Donors applauded the economics of mercy, discovering generosity scales beautifully when outcomes arrive measured and public. Dr. Carter accepted a directorship. Hal accepted a chance to rebuild honor. Lady Whitcomb offered stewardship quietly. The Mastiff slept near the office door, trusting floors he had memorized, guarding nothing except peace. Sophia drafted intake protocols, prevention plans, and outreach routes for youths who recognize fear's handwriting intimately. Press releases traveled ahead, but work began behind, assembling compassion into schedules, budgets, and thresholds. Some victories build stages. The important ones build rooms where breathing becomes easier for everyone present. Consequences traveled quickly because money respects weather and storms discourage picnics dressed as patronage. Sponsorships paused, contracts opened their eyes, and familiar doors discovered hinges poorly maintained under applause. Daniel faced charges consistent with his hobbies. The atomizer became evidence. The text thread refused to vanish. Sir Alistair resigned from certain boards, learned humility reluctantly, and calculated repairs like a contractor visiting ruins. Lady Whitcomb reorganized philanthropy toward transparent programs where metrics replaced ribbon cuttings and speeches retired early. Hal trained new staff, teaching that boredom is safety, and safety is the loudest miracle imaginable. Dr. Carter designed protocols for bite decompression, trigger mapping, and scent bridges that negotiate peace. Sophia stepped away from cameras because healing disobeys schedules, preferring calendars organized by breath and patience. The Mastiff slept heavier near children's laughter, learning that homesickness sometimes ends where work begins.
Redemption rarely shouts, it shovels, which is how a billionaire learned the weight of ordinary work. Sir Alistair arrived early, carried buckets, folded bedding, and discovered gratitude hiding behind the smell of bleach. Hal assigned stalls without ceremony, the way people assign penance when forgiveness begins looking practical. The Mastiff watched him without suspicion, measuring behavior rather than status, collecting evidence like any scientist. Sophia passed occasionally, checked water bowls, adjusted schedules, and allowed gravity to continue its quiet tutoring. Day by day, muscles forgot postures learned from fear, and new reflexes settled like furniture finally assembled. He cleaned until bleach smelled like rain, and rain began to smell like relief, uncomplicated and generous. Nobody filmed those minutes because algorithms love spectacle. Algorithms rarely reward quiet that repairs foundations. The dog slept near his boots, close enough to forgive, far enough to remember distances that keep safety. 2 months later, a celebration smelled like hay bales, coffee, and ink drying on new intake forms. Sophia walked the gravel toward the carriage house, hearing something delicate beneath boards once fashionable and hollow. A faint chorus answered, not human, not rehearsed, a future asking for room before headlines discovered it. 2 pups blinked at daylight like coins lifted from a fountain, wet, surprised, already measuring distances. Midnight listened from the threshold, proud and practical, the way survivors supervise repairs without explaining everything. Sir Alistair hauled fresh straw and kept his eyes on work, a student who finally respected curriculum. Lady Whitcomb organized volunteers with lists that measured compassion like budgets, steady, transparent, appropriately unremarkable. Dr. Carter signed vaccination logs while Hal repaired hinges and quiet overtook spectacle like weather deciding. Sophia paused at the arena's white line and smiled at chalk that once judged, now simply marking ground.